leading up to the next question, we talked about the college experience, and a lot of what we talked about is academic, socially, um, extracurriculars, jobs, careers. Now, what is one thing high schoolers should know before entering the college? Let's go to Vedika.
Yeah, I think in terms of things I wish I'd known, I think I put I put a lot of emphasis on academics and clubs and things like that. I think one of the coolest things about college is the people that you meet there. It's College is one of the few times where you're going to be in a place where everyone is equally as excited and ambitious as you are. I think young people also tend to be very just like energized, enthusiastic about the future. And it's also the only time in your life, assuming you don't go to grad school, where you're surrounded by people your age. When you get into the workforce, you'll have your managers and things like that. But in college, you're going to be living with people who are in your year who are having very similar experiences to you. And so I think that that's a really cool opportunity to get to know people, to meet really interesting people with very diverse interests. Yeah.
Awesome. Let's go to Andrew.
I have two quick suggestions. One of them is to exercise and one of them is to eat healthy. The reason I'm saying this is because when I was working at Duke Tip and Ben was one of my students, I forget who was doing it, but nobody would eat healthy. And they would because when you're in high school, your parents normally cook for you and kind of decide your eating habits to a large degree, and so does the school lunch. But when you're in college, that's not really the case because dining halls have so many options. And I'm not saying you need to eat salad every day, but you need to not just eat like ice cream for all of your meals. My other one was that in high school, you're often on organized sports teams, and fewer people do organized sports teams in college because they're a lot more competitive and they kind of weed people out. So you need to kind of replace that in your life. And exercising makes it easier to sleep and it balances your mood better and it makes it easier to go focus on work later.
Great. Let's go to Lester for this.
Thanks, Ben. I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction. So when I went to my undergrad, I was within 50 miles of where my parents lived at the time. So it was easy for me to visit my hometown. It was easy for me to visit my parents if I missed everybody. But when I went to Harvard, I was a little bit further away from everyone. And I know that people say, oh, maybe, you'll be fine. But the idea is people do feel homesick sometimes. So I would say as a high schooler who is interested in going to college, particularly a college where they will be dorming or staying in an apartment near their place, they will not be near their family or their high school friends or, their community, for example. I would say just be prepared for that. Maybe bring a couple personal effects from your hometown or your home area. Maybe bring some of the foods you like that are local to your area. So being from New Jersey, Taylor ham is, something that we don't really get in other parts of the country. And it sounds silly, but even having that, in your refrigerator, on a Saturday, at lunch or something, when you're thinking, I've been working, on papers and stuff like that, and I kind of miss home. It's a little bit nice to have a little reminder of home too. So I would say part of this is just, for many of you, this will be the first time you're really living away from family and friends. I would say just prepare a little bit for that aspect of it too.
Great, awesome. Thanks so much for your insights. This is the last question, kind of a treat to our audience here. Some people may be seniors in the current college admissions process, and so a lot of people in the registration form were wondering, SAT scores, extracurriculars, essays, what can I do about that? So what advice can you give to high school seniors in the college admissions process? I'll go to Vedika.
Awesome. I have to kind of rake through my brain and try to remember college admissions. But I think that the one thing that comes to mind is concretely, when right now, like probably if you're you're an upperclassman, you're in junior or senior, you can't change like your SAT score, your GPA. So don't worry about them. Push them to the side of your mind. In terms of like your essays, I think try to draft out, or what I did is I tried to draft out how I would express my story in 3 sentences. Like, how would I express the trajectory of my high school career? How did I start? How did I end? What are the things that I did and why did I do them? And then when you write your essays, kind of have that trajectory in the back of your mind and think about if all of your essays are kind of coming together to paint that one story of this one person, and that who you are and this kind of storyline that you're portraying is coming through very clearly, and that all of the essays are kind of portraying a different part of that so that it comes together to paint a more cohesive picture of your story.
When I applied to undergrad and when I applied to law school, I had 2 different experiences. I think I had a better experience with the law school application process because I did a really good job of figuring out exactly where I wanted to go and why. In undergrad, I was kind of just applying to schools that were kind of like near my hometown and stuff like that. And I think sometimes it is really important to take a deep breath and be like, what do I want in a school? Like, what's really, really, really important to me? And kind of what schools can provide that for me. And uh, don't let anyone talk you out of applying to a school that is like a reach, because nobody knows whether you're going to get in or not. So I would just apply to all the schools that you want to go to. Obviously, you should have some realistic options in there to make sure you have options at the end of the day. But yeah, I would focus on your dreams and individual wishes.
All right, great. Lastly, we'll go on to Lester. Now, Lester, it might have been a while, but kind of speak upon your experiences and what you did in high school and undergrad for the grad school application. That kind of stood out, that kind of led you to admission to Rutgers and Harvard.
Sure. I would say the admissions process was kind of similar for my undergrad and my graduate degrees. In both while I was a junior, I think many of our students today are sophomore, junior, senior level. They are one day probably going to have the great opportunity to meet a member of an admissions committee or meet a volunteer alumni from a program who will give them an in-person interview, or today it's probably going to be on Zoom. I can say from preparing both undergraduate and graduate interviews for admission, an important thing to consider is college. And I know when you're 18, this is incredibly difficult. College is like this amazing, gigantic thing right in front of you. But as you move through college and as you go into your 20s, you're going to see that college is just one part of a broader chain of what you're doing. College is one aspect. College will eventually become a tool that you're going to use to affect the change you want to see in the world. So my advice, particularly if you're going to do an admissions interview, is 1, relax. Trust me, everybody interviewing you has also gone through this. We get it. Don't twist yourself up over that. But beyond that advice, I would say something to consider when you're thinking about your essays, when you're thinking about your interviews, when you're thinking about how you fit into college and how the college will fit into you. Think about these programs and think about these schools as how they can effectively become tools to help you make changes in the world. And there's no simple way to put this. We're all aware the world is changing. We're all aware global warming, whether you believe it or not, seems to be happening, so we have to deal with it at some point. The world around us is not as predictable as people thought it was going to be 10, 20 years ago. And as a result, our generation is going to be in charge in the middle of the century. So it will be our responsibility to figure out how are we going to approach the problems that we're probably going to see in 2040 and 2050. So something that I think admissions counselors like to see and they like to read is how their programs, how their alumni networks, how their training can help prepare you for the challenges we are likely to face when we are in charge in maybe 2040, 2050, and definitely in 2060, when we're going to be in all the leadership positions and we're going to be sitting around thinking, oh, we're going to basically be in the position that, you know, people born 50, 60 years ago are in right now, where they're trying to deal with a very complicated and moving situation. We will all one day be in that situation. So thinking critically about how these programs, how the alumni network, how the training, how the access to those professors will help get you to that point where you can make the changes that are probably going to be necessary at that point. And I think that's definitely a perspective that the admissions interviewers and counselors are definitely going to be interested to hear.